The Galactic Federation's first indication that something was amiss came through their long-range sensors. High Overseer Xerix stared at the readings with all four of his optical organs, mandibles clicking in agitation. The energy signatures emanating from the isolated spiral arm were unlike anything recorded in the Federation's billion-year history. Impossible. He chittered, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the soft blue light of the command center. These readings suggest a civilization living on a Class 5 death world. His assistant, Valthera, floated closer, her gaseous form condensing slightly in concern. Perhaps the sensors are malfunctioning. No sapient species could evolve in such conditions. But the sensors weren't malfunctioning. Further scans revealed a civilization not just surviving, but thriving on a planet that by all known laws of evolution should have been impossible to inhabit. The gravity alone was crushing by galactic standards, the atmospheric pressure overwhelming, and the temperature variations extreme enough to shatter most known forms of life. The Federation Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 1,000 species gathered in the Great Crystalline Chamber, their varied forms a testament to the diversity of life in the galaxy. But none of them had evolved under conditions like these. The data suggests they're bipedal endurance predators, announced Chief Scientist Kull, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with excitement and fear. They pursue prey until it collapses from exhaustion. They repair broken bones naturally. They intentionally expose themselves to microdoses of toxins for pleasure in something they call spicy food. A wave of horrified murmurs swept through the chamber. The concept of voluntarily consuming toxins was beyond comprehension. But that's not the most concerning part, Kittel continued. They appear to have developed their technology, not through careful, logical progression like other species, but through what they call trial and error, deliberately failing thousands of times until they succeed. High Overseer Xerix's crystalline form vibrated with distress. You mean they intentionally pursue failure as a path to success? Precisely. And they celebrate these failures, sharing them widely in something they call blooper reels and fail compilations. The council chamber erupted in chaos. The very idea of celebrating failure was anathema to most species, who saw it as a sign of evolutionary weakness. First contact was inevitable, but the Federation approached it with unprecedented caution. They sent their most heavily armored diplomatic vessel, expecting creatures of immense physical prowess and aggression. What they found instead was far more terrifying. The humans greeted them with something called smiles, a baring of teeth that somehow indicated friendship rather than aggression. They welcomed the alien delegation into climate-controlled chambers that the humans themselves found uncomfortably cool and low pressure, demonstrating an awareness of xenobiology that was surprisingly sophisticated. But it was during the cultural exchange that the true horror of humanity became apparent. You mean you intentionally create scenarios to trigger your fear response? For entertainment. Ambassador Valthera's gaseous form swirled in confusion as she tried to comprehend the concept of horror movies. Oh yeah, replied Dr. Sarah Chen, the human cultural attaché, grinning enthusiastically. We love being scared. Have you tried roller coasters yet? They simulate near-death experiences. They're super fun. The Federation representatives struggled to process this information. A species that not only survived on a death world, but intentionally sought out additional fear and danger for pleasure. The humans proved to be diplomatic, friendly, and eager to join the galactic community. But their very nature challenged everything the Federation thought they knew about survival and evolution. They watched in bewilderment as humans casually adapted to nearly any environment, treated deadly situations as challenges to overcome rather than threats to avoid, and approached the most serious matters with something they called humor. As the first day of diplomatic relations drew to a close, High Overseer Xerix made a notation in the official record. The humans are not dangerous because they are aggressive or violent. They are dangerous because they have turned the very act of survival into an art form. They don't just endure. They thrive on challenges that would break most species. Their greatest weapon is not their physical strength or their technology, but their inexplicable ability to find joy in the face of adversity. The Federation would soon learn just how valuable and terrifying that ability could be. 3 months after first contact, the Federation faced its first major crisis involving their new human allies. The Swarm, a hostile hive mind species from the Galactic core, launched a surprise attack against several outlying Federation worlds. High Overseer Xerix watched in mounting horror as the reports came in. The Arcturian colony has fallen, Valthera reported, her gaseous form darkening with distress. The Swarm's biological weapons are overwhelming our defenses. The humans, still new to the galactic stage, offered their assistance. The Federation Council accepted with reluctance, more out of desperation than confidence. No one expected what happened next. The first human military response arrived in the form of the UES Normandy, a relatively small vessel by Federation standards. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on her bridge, surveying the tactical display showing the Swarm's overwhelming numbers. "Well, folks," she announced to her crew, a smile playing at her lips, "looks like we crashed the party a bit late. Guess we'll have to make a memorable entrance." The Federation observers aboard were shocked to hear laughter ripple through the bridge crew in response to what they perceived as a dire situation. The Normandy dove into battle against impossible odds. But instead of the grim determination the Federation expected from warriors facing death, the human crew maintained an almost festive atmosphere. They cracked jokes while dodging plasma bolts, made bets on kill counts, and sang something they called sea shanties during particularly intense firefights. Did that human gunner just yell yeet while launching a tactical nuclear device? Cathal asked in disbelief, watching the battle feeds. "I believe she also drew a crude facial expression on it," Xerix responded, his crystalline form vibrating with confusion. The Swarm, operating on pure logic and collective consciousness, found themselves completely unable to predict or counter the human tactics. Their attempts to analyze and adapt to human battle strategies failed because, as far as they could tell, there was no strategy. Just a series of seemingly random actions tied together by what humans called gut feelings, and winging it. More human ships arrived, each bringing their own unique brand of controlled chaos to the battlefield. They named their ships after mythological figures and historical warriors, decorated their vessels with nose art, and communicated in battle using references to something called memes that even the most sophisticated Federation translation algorithms couldn't decipher. During one particularly fierce engagement, a human destroyer took heavy damage. The Federation observers watched in horror, expecting the crew to abandon ship or surrender. Instead, the humans started playing music. Loud, aggressive music they called metal, through all available communication channels while charging straight at the enemy flagship. "Commander," one of the Federation officers called out, "the humans are broadcasting something called Through the Fire and Flames, while engaging in what they term a pro-gamer move." The Swarm ships, their hive mind overwhelmed by the combination of incomprehensible human behavior and aggressive music, began to show signs of confusion. Their perfectly coordinated movements became erratic. What truly baffled the Federation observers was how the humans treated their wounded. Rather than becoming demoralized, they responded to injuries with something called gallows humor, telling jokes and sharing stories, even as medical teams worked to save lives. "Did you hear about the navigator who got hit by plasma fire?" One injured human asked another in the medical bay. He said it was the worst heartburn he's ever had. Both humans laughed, despite their injuries. The Federation medical staff were stunned to discover that this behavior actually seemed to improve their recovery rates. As the battle turned in their favor, the Federation Council received an unexpected request from the human fleet. They wanted to organize something called a space barbecue to celebrate their victory, while the fighting was still ongoing. "Let me understand this correctly," High Overseer Xerix addressed Captain Rodriguez during an emergency communication. "You want to pause in the middle of a war to cook meat over fire and consume fermented beverages." "Not pause," Rodriguez corrected with a grin. We can multitask. Nothing boosts morale like a good cookout. Plus, we've got some great new recipes we want to share with our allies. Ever tried something called hot wings? The Federation representatives watched in amazement as the human ships coordinated their efforts to create a defended space where crews could briefly rotate through for food and rest, all while maintaining combat operations. The swarm, already struggling to comprehend human battle tactics, seemed completely paralyzed by this unprecedented behavior. They're not just warriors, Valthera observed, her gaseous form swirling thoughtfully. They've somehow turned warfare itself into a community celebration. How do you fight an enemy that treats battle like a festival? The answer, as the swarm was learning, was that you couldn't. Their logical, hive-mind approach to warfare had no framework for dealing with opponents who met the horror of battle with jokes, music, and improvised strategy. By the time the last swarm ship retreated, the Federation had learned a crucial lesson about their new allies. Humans didn't just survive combat. They thrived in it, finding ways to build bonds and create joy even in the darkest moments. Their laughter in the face of death wasn't a sign of madness, but rather their greatest weapon against fear itself. The swarm's retreat should have been cause for celebration throughout Federation space. Instead, it brought a new concern. The hive-mind species had begun adapting their tactics, learning from their encounters with humanity. They were evolving. Admiral Sarah Chen, recently promoted after her successful role as cultural attaché, stood before the Federation Council, her presentation causing ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. The swarm is developing countermeasures against our conventional warfare techniques, she explained, a hint of excitement in her voice that made several council members nervous. So we're proposing something new, Project Muse. High Overseer Xyrix's crystalline form refracted light in patterns indicating deep concern. You want to deploy artists and musicians as frontline warriors. Not exactly, Chen replied, grinning. We want to turn human creativity itself into a weapon. The Federation's military commanders watched in bewilderment as humans began integrating what they called performance art into their battle strategies. Ships were painted in disorienting patterns that seemed to shift and move, breaking up their silhouettes while simultaneously confusing enemy targeting systems. The patterns had been designed by human artists who specialized in something called optical illusions. But that was just the beginning. Human musicians collaborated with Federation scientists to develop what they termed sonic warfare, complex harmonics that disrupted the swarm's hive-mind communication while simultaneously boosting morale among allied forces. The compositions combined classical orchestral pieces with something humans called dubstep, creating soundscapes that were both beautiful and psychologically devastating to the enemy. Are they playing Mozart remixed with bass drops during combat maneuvers? Valthera asked, her gaseous form rippling in confusion as she observed a battle. Apparently, they call this one Symphony of Destruction. Catal replied, her bioluminescence pulsing in time with the beat despite herself. The humans didn't stop there. They deployed holographic artists to create massive illusions in space, phantom fleets that appeared and disappeared, cosmic art installations that doubled as tactical deceptions. Writers and poets crafted psychological warfare broadcasts that combined epic storytelling with subtle cognitive manipulation, weaving narratives that warmed their way into the collective consciousness of the swarm. One particularly effective broadcast began. This is a story about how the universe dreams, and how those dreams become nightmares when you threaten your children. The poetic transmission caused such confusion in the hive mind that an entire swarm battle group retreated without firing a shot. The Federation's military theorists struggled to classify these new tactics. Was it art? Was it warfare? The humans just called it getting creative. But the true masterpiece of Project Muse came during the Battle of Arcturus Prime. The swarm launched a massive counterattack, confident they had finally developed immunity to human psychological warfare. They hadn't counted on humanity's ability to improvise. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding the flagship UES Odyssey, orchestrated what humans would later call the greatest show off Earth. As the swarm fleet approached, the human ships began a coordinated performance that combined space ballet with precision combat maneuvers. Each ship's movement was choreographed to an ancient human composition called the Ride of the Valkyries. The Federation ships, now equipped with human-designed artistic warfare systems, joined the performance. The resulting battle looked more like an elaborate dance than traditional combat, with ships moving in intricate patterns while laying down devastating fire in perfect rhythm with the music. "They're not just fighting," Admiral Chen explained to the stunned Federation observers. "They're telling a story, and they're making the swarm part of it, whether they want to be or not." The swarm, attempting to analyze and counter these tactics, found themselves trapped in a narrative they couldn't comprehend. Their logical minds tried to find patterns in what appeared to be pure chaos, but was actually carefully orchestrated art. The more they tried to understand it, the more their hive mind tied itself in knots. When a squadron of human ships began broadcasting a synchronized light show, accompanied by something they called space shanties, the swarm's command structure suffered a cascading failure. Their hive mind, unable to process the combination of military precision and artistic expression, began to fragment. "This isn't warfare," High Overseer Zurix observed, his crystalline form vibrating in amazement. "This is performance art with explosions. Why not both?" Chen replied with a shrug. "Humans have always found beauty in battle. We're just making it literal." The Federation's military doctrine underwent a radical transformation after that battle. They began integrating human creative specialists into their fleet operations. Ships that once carried only weapons and shields now also housed art studios, music laboratories, and performance spaces. The line between cultural center and military installation blurred. The swarm, faced with an enemy that could turn creativity itself into a weapon, was forced to fundamentally reconsider their approach to warfare. How do you fight an opponent who treats battle as an art form, who finds joy in chaos, and who can turn beauty itself into a devastating weapon? The answer they were learning was that you don't. You either learn to appreciate the art, or you become part of it. The Federation's military strategic command was in chaos. Not because they were losing the war against the swarm. Quite the opposite. Victory after victory was being achieved, but no one could explain exactly how. "This makes no tactical sense," exclaimed General Kovacs, his crystalline appendages gesturing wildly at the holographic battle display. "The humans are violating every principle of strategic warfare we've developed over millennia. And yet they keep winning," finished Admiral Chen, who had been invited to explain human battle doctrine to the Federation's military leadership. The problem was, there didn't seem to be any doctrine to explain. The latest victory had been particularly baffling. A human commander named James Martinez had defeated a swarm fleet 3 times his size by implementing what he called the pizza delivery strategy. "You see," Martinez explained to the bewildered Federation commanders, "I figured if pizza delivery drivers can always find the fastest route to any destination while keeping the food hot, we could apply similar principles to fleet movements." The resulting battle had looked like pure chaos to traditional military observers. Ships jumped in and out of formation in patterns that seemed random, that somehow always ended up exactly where they needed to be at precisely the right moment. The swarm's predictive algorithms had crashed trying to make sense of it. High Overseer Zurix watched the battle replay for the 100th time, his crystalline form vibrating with a mixture of awe and frustration. They based their entire battle strategy on the delivery of heated nutrition discs. "To be fair," Admiral Chen added, "we also incorporated some techniques from professional basketball. The whole fake left, go right thing works surprisingly well in 3-dimensional space warfare." The Federation's tactical analysts were on the verge of nervous breakdowns. Humans weren't just ignoring conventional military wisdom. They were actively drawing inspiration from the most mundane aspects of their civilization. One commander had successfully routed a swarm attack by applying principles from something called kindergarten teacher crowd control. Children are basically tiny agents of chaos, the commander had explained. If you can keep 25-year-olds focused and moving in the same direction, you can handle anything the swarm throws at you. The Federation's attempt to codify human battle tactics into their military database had produced some interesting entries. Strategy number 47. The Roomba maneuver. Ships move in seemingly random patterns while gradually herding enemy forces into a trap, inspired by autonomous cleaning devices. Strategy number 89. The Flash Mob. Multiple ships appear to be acting independently until suddenly coordinating in an unexpected symphony of destruction. Strategy number 126. The Cat Strategy. Sometimes ships would deliberately present their most vulnerable areas, only to spring devastating counterattacks when the enemy took the bait. Like a cat's belly, the humans explained, to the continued confusion of Federation tacticians. During one particularly crucial battle, a human commander had achieved victory by having his fleet perform maneuvers based on something called interpretive dance. The swarm's attempts to predict their movements had been so thoroughly confounded that several of their ships had collided with each other. But how do you plan for these strategies? Demanded General Kivax during a tactical review. How do you analyze and improve them? Oh, we don't plan them. Admiral Chen replied cheerfully. We just kind of vibe it. The word vibe had since entered the Federation's tactical lexicon, though no one was quite sure what it meant. Attempts to translate it into various alien languages had caused at least 3 artificial intelligences to temporarily shut down in protest. The Federation's younger officers began adopting some human approaches, much to the horror of their superiors. During one engagement, a Federation commander had successfully repelled a swarm attack by coordinating their ship's movements to something humans called the Macarena. The humans aren't just changing how we fight, Valthera observed, her gaseous form swirling thoughtfully. They're changing how we think about fighting itself. She was right. Traditional military doctrine focused on overwhelming force, superior technology, or perfect coordination. Humans had introduced concepts like winging it, playing it by ear, and perhaps most disturbingly, holding my beer and watching this. The swarm, for their part, had begun showing signs of what human psychologists termed combat-induced existential crisis. Their hive minds struggled to cope with an enemy that treated warfare like a form of improvisational theater. During one notable encounter, a swarm commander had actually opened communications with a human fleet, not to negotiate, but to ask a single question. Why did your ships just perform a synchronized dance routine in the middle of a battlefield? Why not? Had been the human commander's response, followed by, want to join in? We're taking requests. The Federation's military strategic command eventually gave up trying to formally classify human battle strategies. Instead, they simply added a new category to their tactical database, human stuff. It was simultaneously their least and most effective strategic doctrine. As one frustrated Federation instructor told their students, the key to understanding human tactical doctrine is accepting that there is no tactical doctrine. They're making it up as they go along, and somehow that's their greatest strength. The turning point in the war came not with a grand battle or a superweapon, but with a simple conversation. The swarm, their hive mind fragmented by repeated exposure to human unpredictability, did something unprecedented. They asked to talk. The Federation Council chamber was packed as representatives gathered to witness the historic meeting. The swarm had chosen to manifest through a single crystalline avatar, its faceted surface reflecting the chamber's lights in mesmerizing patterns. Facing it stood Admiral Chen, looking surprisingly relaxed for someone meeting humanity's greatest enemy. We do not understand. The swarm's avatar began, its voice a harmonious blend of countless minds. Our analysis indicates that humans are simultaneously the least logical and most effective species we have encountered. This paradox threatens the stability of our collective consciousness. Chen smiled, a gesture that still made some Federation members nervous. Maybe that's because you're trying to understand us through logic alone. How's that working out for you? The avatar's surface rippled, indicating distress. We have analyzed every human battle strategy, every cultural transmission, every artistic warfare deployment. We have found 47,822 direct contradictions in human behavior patterns. You treat warfare like entertainment, danger like pleasure, and impossibility like inspiration. You are chaos given form. That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said about us, Chen replied with a grin. High Overseer Xerix watched the exchange with growing fascination. In all the Federation's history, no one had ever seen the swarm express confusion. They operated on pure logic. It was what made them such a formidable enemy. Yet somehow, humanity had done what countless civilizations had failed to do. They had made the swarm question itself. Your species emerged on a death world. The Avatar continued. Logic dictates you should be aggressive, territorial, focused solely on survival. Instead, you create art in the middle of battle. You sing while facing death. You turn warfare into dance and strategy into games. You smile in the face of extinction. We cannot compute this. That's just it, Chen explained, leaning forward. We learned early on that pure logic, pure survival instinct, isn't enough. On Earth, every day was a battle against a world that could kill us in 1,000 ways. We could have become purely focused on survival, but instead, we chose to find joy, to create beauty, to laugh in the face of death. That's not chaos. That's the purest form of survival there is. The avatar's surface began to shift through complex patterns as the hive mind processed this concept. You are saying that your apparent illogic is logical. I'm saying that embracing the full spectrum of existence, logic and emotion, planning and improvisation, fear and joy, makes us stronger than focusing on any one aspect. We don't just survive, we live. Valthera, who had been observing silently, noticed something remarkable. The swarm avatar's crystalline structure was beginning to resonate with something that looked surprisingly like human brainwave patterns. Your species, the avatar said slowly, treats existence itself as art. Every moment, whether in peace or war, is an opportunity for creation, for joy, for what you call having fun. This is inefficient, illogical, and yet it works, Chen finished, because life isn't logical. The universe isn't logical. Sometimes the best response to chaos is to embrace it, dance with it, and make it your own. The Federation Council watched in amazement as the swarm avatar began to produce its own light patterns, not the usual rigid, geometric forms of hive mind communication, but flowing, organic patterns that looked almost artistic. We request, the avatar announced, its voice carrying a new harmonic quality, to learn more about this human concept of fun, for research purposes, of course. Of course, Chen agreed, her smile widening. How do you feel about starting with karaoke? In the cycles that followed, the galaxy witnessed something unprecedented. The swarm didn't just cease hostilities, they began to change. Their ships started appearing in less rigid formations. Their communications began incorporating elements of human music. Some even reported seeing swarm vessels attempting to perform synchronized maneuvers that looked suspiciously like dance routines. The Federation's understanding of strength underwent a fundamental shift. They had always seen humanity's physical resilience, their technological adaptability, and their tactical unpredictability as their greatest assets. But now they understood. Humanity's true power lay in their ability to find joy in existence itself, to turn survival into art, and to share that gift with others. We were wrong, High Overseer Xerix admitted during the formal peace ceremony. We thought humans were dangerous because they survived on a death world. The truth is both simpler and more profound. They are remarkable because they learned to do more than survive. They learned to live, to create, to celebrate existence itself. And in doing so, they taught the rest of us how to truly be alive. As the ceremony concluded, human representatives introduced both Federation and Swarm delegates to something they called a dance party. The sight of crystalline beings, gaseous entities, and a partially reformed hivemind attempting to do the chicken dance would be recorded as one of the most significant moments in galactic history. The humans, naturally, just called it a good start to the weekend.